We just want to bring you some words from the Prime Minister. Rishi Sunak has been speaking at a school in South London this week, no doubt informing them all about his plans to make them carry on learning maths until the age of 18. But he's been taking some questions, including one on the emergency anti-strike legislation that the government announced yesterday afternoon. Let's have a listen to what he said.
Well, first of all, it's great to be here at Harris Battersea this morning, talking to some of the amazing teachers and fantastic students. All the opportunities that I've had in my life began with the fact that I was fortunate to receive an amazing education. It's one of the most important reasons I got into politics, was to ensure that every one of our children has a brilliant education. That's why we invested billions of pounds more in schools in the autumn statement, but we've got to keep going because every child deserves a fantastic education. It's one of the most powerful things we can do for them and our country, and that's what the government's priority is. With regard to strikes, yesterday the government wrote to all union leaders, inviting them in for talks on Monday. We incredibly value the important work that our public sector workers do, especially our nurses, and we want to have an honest, grown-up conversation about what's affordable, what's responsible for the country. Those invitations have gone out, and I'm hopeful that those meetings can happen on Monday so we can have a productive conversation and find a way through this.
And just on the legislation that you brought in, could people be sacked for not going to work in the health service?
So I fully believe in the union's role in our society and the freedom for them to strike. But I also believe that that should be balanced with the right of ordinary working people to go about their lives free from significant disruption. And that's why we're going to bring forward new laws in common with countries like France, Italy, Spain and others that ensure that we have minimum levels of safety in critical areas like fire, like ambulance, so that even when strikes are going on, you know that your health will be protected. I think that's entirely reasonable, and that's what our new laws will do.
When it comes to the current industrial action being taken by nurses, they've indicated that they might be willing to settle for 10%. Could you go a bit further with your pay offer? Could you meet them halfway?
We've always been clear that we want to have a grown-up, honest conversation, a two-way conversation with union leaders, and that's why the government has written, all departments have written to all their unions, inviting them in for talks on Monday so that we can have those conversations, talking about what's affordable, what's reasonable, what's responsible for our country. I think everyone agrees that the most pressing economic priority we have is reducing the cost of living, and getting a grip of inflation is the best way we can do that to ease the cost of living, not only for nurses, but for everyone. And that's why earlier this week I made 5 promises about what I wanted to do, and that was to halve inflation, grow the economy, reduce debt, cut waiting lists, and stop the boats.
Will those talks that you're talking about inviting the unions in for include talks about this year's pay?
So what we've said is we want to have a grown-up, honest conversation with all union leaders about what is responsible, what is reasonable, and what is affordable for our country when it comes to pay. We think that those conversations should happen. That's why we've invited everyone in to have those talks on Monday, and I'm hopeful that those talks can be constructive and we can find a way through this.
Beyond the industrial unrest, in the wider NHS, there is a crisis. People are, we don't know how many, but people are almost certainly unnecessarily dying. Does that trouble you?
The NHS is obviously under enormous pressure as we recover from COVID, and I have enormous admiration for all the people working incredibly hard in the NHS right now to help get us through that. Now, we are supporting them with billions of pounds of extra funding, but in particular this winter, what we want to do is make sure that we move people out of hospitals into social care, into communities. That's one of the most powerful ways we can ease some of the pressures on A&E departments and ambulances that are waiting too long. If we can move people into social care, that's why we've put money into doing that. We need to make sure that money reaches the front line and makes a difference. And there's various other initiatives that we're rolling out that will also help ease some of the burdens. But people should rest assured, one of my promises that I made this week was to tackle NHS waits, and I'm fully committed to doing that. We're putting the extra money in, and we need to make sure that the initiatives that we've put in place actually make a difference. But this is what I'm focused on. I set out 5 promises for the country this week: to halve inflation, reduce debt, cut waiting lists, stop the boats, grow the economy. That's what I'm prioritising.
You spoke also in your speech earlier this week about the importance of family, and you spoke about how important your family is to you. How do you feel then when you see the royal family being so publicly torn apart?
I think, as you would expect, it's not appropriate for me to comment on matters to do with the royal family.
More broadly, Prince Harry has talked about the number of Taliban fighters he believed he killed in Afghanistan. Just on the point about military personnel talking about the number of people they believe they have killed, is that wise? Does that create a security risk for anyone who's been in the forces?
You know, again, I wouldn't comment on matters to do with the royal family. I would just say I'm enormously grateful to our armed forces for the incredible job they do in keeping us all safe. We're all very fortunate for their service.